Amazing story. That really, thank you for sharing, because that really resonates with the work that we do. I know the work that you're now doing is based on that. And I was listening to you and thinking, gosh, there are so many of my clients when I first start working with them who are in that state of unawareness, unaware that they're trapped inside an inauthentic self. And then when you help them get present to the inauthenticities and the force and the energy that they're putting into the mask, which is what we were going to come back to, and the persona and the identity that they've created for themselves that they believe is how they have to be to achieve results.
Yeah.
There is a kind of awakening, but it's a dark awakening. It's a self-realization, which is, ooh. And then when you help them see that there is another way, and they can be another way, and they can be more authentic and more free from that, there's a relief, right? There's this whole kind of like, oh, I can let go, I can shed, I can be who I know myself to be. Because when I talk to my clients about how they're being with their children or their wife or their family, it's never how they're being at work. There's always this work persona, home persona, and the energy it takes to put the mask on and take it off and keep those worlds separate. And then when you help them see that they can shed that persona and that they are safe to connect with their teams and still achieve performance outcomes, they are safe to connect with themselves and still achieve performance outcomes, which is a giant leap of faith.
It's more than and achieve performance outcomes, it's achieve much better performance outcomes.
Correct.
That's the thing, you know, coming from where we do corporate finance professionals, we understand that you have to hit the numbers, and that investing in things just to make people happy isn't going to wash with lots of boards and decision-making processes. But this stuff works.
It really does. It really does. And one of the things that I come up against, and this is for any of my current or future clients out there listening to this, I'm sorry, I still don't have a solution to this. People say to me, how can you prove that your work achieves those performance outcomes? How can you prove that what you're doing enables people to achieve and outperform? And it's something that I'm still looking at, is how do we link who people are being, which is intangible, to tangible performance outcomes.
Well, there's an awful lot of studies between large companies and academia that prove this stuff. It's a lot of work and not what I want to focus my life on.
No, me neither.
But there's the latest studies, and two of them were very close within ballpark, found that with executive coaching, for example, you get a 788% return on investment. So it's like $8 on the dollar. It's amazing. It's such a no-brainer from creating more value.
Yeah, it is.
More value, more revenue, more funding, whatever your KPIs are. This stuff works. And I do surveys at the beginning and end that show the difference on culture, but what I have found is that performance increases and people see that it's increased because of this journey, and we have a deep dive at the end of the year to say, okay, has it worked? Here's what the data shows. What have the commercial results been, and do we believe that there is a correlation that we can see without going into a 6-year PhD program on it?
Great.
But it depends. I kind of want to move on to the problems.
Yeah, well that's exactly right. What are the problems that our clients are experiencing?
Well, my clients being CEOs or MDs or founders of medium-sized scaling digital or tech businesses. And all of the time, we kept finding the same 3 problems. And it's not just in this industry. This seems to be, I'll be curious to hear what you think as well. But the first one is always attracting and retaining the right people. And what does right mean? Mm-hmm. The second is getting everyone aligned, rowing in the same direction. That feeling that everybody gets it, which is an intangible but incredibly frustrating if you feel you're having to pull your team in different directions all the time, especially when they're scaling. And then the third is results. It's that simple. You've got to hit the numbers, otherwise you won't have an organisation to have a high performing team in. Hitting the numbers. So what we did was develop with our clients a program that solved these three problems, pulling together all of the learnings that we'd had from a huge amount of different coaching modalities, and creating a structure for that. So the first one, attracting and retaining the right people. If you don't know what defines your culture, if you haven't operationalized your values, then you won't be able to have a good cultural fit, and people will want to leave. If they don't feel safe, they will want to leave. If you don't support their growth, they will want to leave. So our program brings all of this together. The second bit, with getting everybody aligned, and I love this question, and I know it's a closed question, but I go and ask my clients, if I go and ask everybody in your organisation, what is the purpose of your business, and what are the values of your business, and what actions do you take when you're in line with the values, heading in the direction of purpose? Will everybody say exactly the same thing, or pretty much the same thing? And of course the answer's always no. Although the truth is they might not want to say no, because, you know, as a leader of an organisation, you want to, even when you first meet a potential coach or facilitator, you want to look good. But the truth is, when we get a bit under it and build trust, then the answer's no. 99% of the cases anyway.
Is it possible to have that question be answered with a yes?
Absolutely.
How?
Yeah. Well, I feel the problem is, you've referred to it before, organisations stick their values on the wall and they come up with a purpose. Now, especially when you've got a business that is scaling from one founder, the values and the purpose will come from the founder. But as you start building that team, it gets past about 5 people where everyone just intrinsically gets it. Mm-hmm. Right? When it starts getting bigger and you start having teams, or silos as they seem to turn into, then you need to be conscious and intentional about it. And the way that we do this is go in and ask people, get a cross-section of the organisation, ask people for stories that explain about specific stories about when they feel most proud about working with the organisation. And out of that we discover the actions they take when they're at their best and the impact that they want to have on the world. This should be, unless there's something extremely wrong, in line with the values of the founder, if the founder's still around. Mm-hmm. But moreover, this makes it resonate with a cross-section of the business to a point where they become absolute net promoters of this. They just want to go out and tell everybody.
Yeah.
The important thing is as well, each of those values are linked back to real stories that people can tell, and what they do is go out into the wider community and tell those stories and explain what that means for the values of the organisation and the impact that they're trying to have on the world. But it's real, it's not just stuck on the wall. Does that make sense?
Of course.
Awesome.
Well, it's one of the things that I think is most important when developing performance culture, which is what we do. We're coaches and consultants, but we're working on performance culture, which is what you're talking to. And culture is a living, breathing organism of the organisation. It's not a poster, it's not static, it's forever evolving and emerging, and it's always happening, right? It's not a doing, it's a way of being, which is always there. It's a state.
And moreover, if you've got a high performing team, especially because of the work, a big fan of Patrick Lencioni's model, if you've got a high performing team, because we're all humans and fallible, if we don't pay attention to the performance of that team and how they're being together, over time their performance will degrade. Mm-hmm. Even if it was the best team ever. Yeah. Over time it will degrade. So we need to always pay attention to this and be conscious of it.
Correct. Which many organisations are not. They're not intentional about creating their performance culture. They allow their performance culture to be a response to the activities of the organisation, not a performance input. They see culture as a performance output. So when we're successful, our culture's really strong. When we're not successful, our culture's really weak. Well, hang on. Have a consistent culture regardless of the actual performance outcomes, because in the mining industry, for example, it's cyclical. So they have peaks of success because commodity prices go up. So there's lots of cash, there's lots of reward and recognition, there's lots of money. And then commodity
investment in culture and performance.
And assets and portfolio strategy, everything moves when the commodity prices are up. And then naturally, cyclically, the commodity prices drop. It happens every couple of years. And then the industry decides to contract with the external commodity prices dropping. So the culture expands, contracts, and it's very damaging long term, because when it contracts, people go into fear. They can see commodity prices dropping because it's visible, it's out there. Everyone starts talking about when's the next round of redundancies going to happen. People start then looking for other jobs. Everyone goes into a state of survival. The performance culture goes into this lower state of being. You know, people are focusing more on themselves than each other. And then it expands again, and then everyone's all safe, and they're into collaboration, and they're into expansion and growth, and it's just so unsustainable.
You said something there about people starting to care about themselves when they're in fear and it's contracting. They want to care about themselves more.
Yes.
I remember you put me onto a thing about safety culture from DuPont once.
Yes.
Whereby the best state of safety culture was that you care about everyone around you, not just yourself.
Correct.
So is there a correlation there when the commodity prices contract and people start becoming from a place of fear, and we haven't got a consistent, strong culture that engenders really caring about everybody around you? Do you see a correlation with a degradation in safety?
Oh, completely. And I've got a really good example that I'd love to share with you, where what we do, the conversations that we have with our clients, are secret, confidential. We can't share them with anybody, right? So we can see the difference we're making, but nobody else knows it's because of our conversation, because that's a private, personal conversation. Now, last year, one of my clients, the CEO of a mining company, and the commodity prices that they were trading in were starting to drop. And that CEO said to me, I gave them feedback from what I was hearing in the organisation was, people are now going into fear. What are you going to do about this? Your performance culture is going to be harmed. And they said to me, well, I have no choice. The investors expect us to maintain a certain amount of free cash flow. They expect a certain return. The most variable cost that we have that we can use as a lever is people. So this is just what we do. It's what the whole industry does. So of course, this is what's going to happen.
I love that. We have no choice.
We have no choice. So I coached them, this CEO, to really look at possibility and free their mind up from this mental model. The mining industry, everybody does this. Contraction, get rid of people. Expansion, grow your portfolio. And on inquiry and looking at it curiously, they realised that actually they could have a different kind of conversation with the investors. They could protect their people. They could do something completely different to the rest of the industry and actually find cost elsewhere that wasn't the norm, but it was there once the CEO looked. And last financial year, they went into a downward dip in their free cash flow. The investors were still happy because they managed to maintain their dividend, although their free cash flow dropped, the dividend maintained, and not a single redundancy. Now, what that did internally was it rewrote the whole belief system of the organisation, because everybody was expecting redundancies, everybody was expecting a reorganisation, and it didn't happen.
Wow.
So their entire belief system at a performance culture level shifted. And everybody now feels safer, and everybody now feels like, oh, okay, maybe we can't predict what's going to happen. Maybe we are being cared for, because their number one value is care. And I said to the CEO, how is this in line with your values?
I see. Just imagine what that's happening, the impact that's happening in the industry as well, because everyone will know. They'll be looking around at that organisation and thinking, well, that's the kind of place I want to go.
Which is retention of talent and attraction of talent, because look at what they didn't do. They didn't contract when cash dropped. And to link it back to your question around safety, I believe it's fundamentally impacting on safety performance. And in the mining industry, unfortunately at the moment, people die. People die, fatalities occur. And I would say more regularly than I'm comfortable with. More regularly than I'm comfortable with is they happen. They shouldn't happen. And at the moment, the industry is not in a place where they are zero tolerance. They say they are, but it actually occurs. So people die in the course of creating profits and cash for investors.
So if it was zero tolerance, a person dying would mean the chairman resigning, right?
Somebody, yeah, exactly. But that doesn't happen.
That doesn't happen?
No. Yeah, so fatalities occur in the mining industry, and the CEO has to obviously make a statement and declare what their new actions are going to be around safety, but it's tolerated. It's not accepted, but it's tolerated at the moment, and it's just a belief that that's where the industry's at. Now, if the aviation industry, for example, accepted and tolerated fatalities like the mining industry does, not a single one of us would step foot on an aeroplane. However, there are thousands and thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of people going and working in mines which operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and they are at risk of their lives being lost. And it happens. 50% of global mining fatalities occur in South Africa, and the other 50% occur mostly in developing countries.
Wow.
I know. It's alarming. And it's, there's an inherent risk in the industry, so we can't be naive to the fact that it's a very, very risky activity, especially when working underground, more so than open pit, for example, or the refining process can, cause you to be exposed to very high levels of chemical exposure, like caustic acid, and so it's very, very high inherent risk. Nonetheless, that doesn't mean that people should die when they go to work. So back to your question, does this link to safety? Well, yes, because when people go into fear, when they go into looking after themselves, when they go into self-protection mode, safety is a collective responsibility. It's an environment that you have to maintain collectively. You can't, in a mine, just look after yourself. You have to be looking out for everybody. And if you're going into that survival mode of, what if I lose my job, or what if I'm not protected here? Subconsciously, you're going to be focusing on a narrower field of vision. You're going to be reducing your awareness, and then safety things can occur.
So we talked about the two different ways of leadership, one being this short-termist and the other being, one of purpose. And the short-termist focus on financial results that impacted negatively on the safety culture of Boeing in the last couple of years.
Correct.
With the crisis they had the year, which had a negative impact on their share price, and in the long term was really detrimental. Aren't they worried about that in the mining industry?
Who?
The people that are running it? Or rather, is it them that we need to be talking about? Because surely as consumers we care about people dying from the products that we buy.
It's a really great question, and the conversation, I thought the conversation had to be had at CEO level. Then I thought, hang on, it must be the boards that we need to be having this conversation with. Actually, what I've learned over the last couple of years, it's the people, it's not even the investors. It's the people or the organisations that are giving the cash to the investors to invest in the mining companies that need to be in this conversation. So the funds, the pensions, the organisations, the banks that are giving the money to the investors to say, hey, I want this amount of return on my money, put it into any industry you like, because all I'm concerned about is the return. The investors will then look at the mining industry and go, oh, that's a good return, I'll put the money there. But what these people should be saying to the investors is, do not invest my money in an organisation that tolerates fatalities. They should be ethically choosing where to put their money, not just focusing on getting a return, but getting a return in the right way, because that organisation has proven that it can take care of its people, it can take care of its stakeholders, it can protect people from being killed at work and create off-the-charts returns. That's the thing, they've got to be able to keep people safe and create the returns, which goes back to the conversation that you and I are having, which is, it's not just what organisations are doing, it's how they're doing it, and who they're being as leaders and who they're being at a team level to create both safety for their employees and their stakeholders and performance outcomes that they never could have thought was possible. And at the moment, unfortunately, the mining industry struggles with holding the belief that they can operate and have zero fatalities.
Wow. What are you going to do about it?
Well, that's exactly what my life goal, why I do what I do, my purpose is to transform the global mining industry and to have people be able to go to work and feel safe, not just from a physical safety perspective, but also a psychological safety, because there is also in the mining industry a track record of sexual harassment, bullying, intimidation, low levels of diversity and inclusion. So there's a whole heap of work to be done around safety psychological safety, physical safety, and creating a world where the mining industry can protect its people, its stakeholders, they can contribute to the communities and the societies that they're impacting on, they can make better environmental decisions and produce returns that the investors had never thought were possible. That's what we're up to, and it's just about keeping the conversation open. It's not necessarily the work that we're doing. The work that we do is really important, but actually what's more important is the conversation. And I'm committed to bringing to life these challenges in a compassionate way. It's not about judgment, it's not about what's wrong and what's right, it's not morality, because the industry has got to where it is today because of where it's been in the past. You know, we're on an evolutionary journey with the mining industry. It's just about keeping the conversation open. It's about helping the leaders of these organisations feel brave enough to say that this isn't okay, what are we going to do about it, for them to have the conversations internally more powerfully, for them to put their head a little bit above the parapet and come out of survival mode and have a bit more courage in, you know, saying, actually, I know we're currently tolerating fatalities, that's not okay. How can we stop this? How can we stop this from happening? And then ultimately the investors giving those executives more freedom to invest in the solution, which is encouraging people to feel safer and freer, to actually make empowered decisions at the front line, because there's so much compliance in mining which is necessary, but there's not so much empowerment. And they need to shift from just following the rule book to follow the rule book, and you've got some leverage here to make an informed decision because you understand the risk at the front line level. You can actually make a decision in the moment to stop work. If it feels unsafe, if it looks unsafe, if you deem it to be unsafe, stop. Those kinds of decisions need to be reinforced by executives. But of course it's risky, because if you stop work, you stop production, you stop therefore cash, you know, it all knocks onto the investor. Just one person at the front line stopping a job can ultimately impact on investor returns if the collective do it too much, right? So it's a difficult
It's possible
balancing.
though, because
Yeah.
you know, because of some disasters in the oil industry specifically, as opposed to mining. I worked in the oil industry, and I have a lot of friends that are working in the industry on rigs now, and there is a culture where if whoever you are, if you put your hand up, work stops.
Yes.
And there's a business case for it.
Yes.
Because of, you look at Piper Alpha and the huge disasters and the cost that has.
Yes.
Even if you need to stop in the short term, the long term impact on your share price is positive.
And there must be, therefore, freedom for the CEO and the board of those organisations to be able to say to their investors, you haven't got the return that you anticipated, we're off by 1%, but we're off by 1% because we kept everyone safe. And you've told us that that's as equally as important as the returns.
And the long-term impact on the share price and the value for the investors will be better.
The first mining company to achieve this and achieve it well is going to be the trailblazer for the industry.
And it will give their customers that buy the product, buy the materials that they mine to make materials, that give them something to talk about.
Yeah.
Which is positive.
Yes.
As well.
It's just finding the CEO and the board that want to be the trailblazer, because again, it's your head above the parapet, right? It's like making yourself something that you're maybe not believing you are.